Let's continue reading the Real Barenziah, Volume 4. Everything I have ever loved, I have lost, Barenziah thought despondently, looking at the mounted knights behind and ahead, her tired woman near her in a carriage. Yet I have gained a measure of wealth and power, and the promise of more to come. Dearly have I bought it. Now I do understand better Tiber Septim's love of it, if he has often paid such prices. For surely worth is measured by the price we pay. By her wish, she rode on a shiny roan mare, clad as a warrior in resplendent chainmail of dark elven make. As the days slowly slipped by and her train rode the winding road eastward into the setting sun, around her gradually rose the step-sided mountain slopes of Morrowind. The air was thin, and a chill late autumn wind blew constantly, but it was also rich with the sweet spicy smell of the late-blooming black rose, which was native to Morrowind, and grew in every shadowy nook and crevice of its highlands, finding nourishment even in the stoniest banks and ridges, in small villages and towns ragged dark elven folk gathered along the road to cry her name or simply gape. Most of her kind knightly escort were red guards, with a few high elves, Nords, and Bretons. As they moved their way into the heart of Morrowind, they grew increasingly uncomfortable and clung together in protective clusters. Even the elven knight seemed wary. But Barenziah felt at home, at last. She felt the welcome extended to her by the land, her land. Symmachus met her at the Mournhold border with an escort of knights, about half of whom were dark elven, in imperial battle dress, she noted. There was a grand parade of entry into the city and speeches of welcome from stately dignitaries. I have had the queen's suit refurbished for you, the general told her later, when they reached the palace, but you may change anything not to your taste, of course. He went on about details of coronation, which was to be held in a week. He was his old commanding self, but she sensed something else as well. He was eager for her approval of the arrangements, was in fact fishing for it. That was new. He had never required her commendation before. He asked her nothing about her stay in the imperial city, or of her affair with Tiber Septim, although Barenziah was certain Relaine had told him, or earlier written him, everything in detail. The ceremony itself was so much else, was a mixture of old and new, parts of it from the ancient dark elven tradition of Mournhold, the others dictated by the imperial decree. She was sworn to the service of the Empire, and Tiber Septim as well as to the land of Mournhold and its people. She accepted oaths of fealty and allegiance from the people, the nobility, and the council. This last was composed of a blend of imperial emissaries, advisors they were called, and native representatives of the Mournhold people, who were mostly elders in accordance with elven custom. Barenziah later found that much of her time was occupied in attempting to reconcile these two factions and their cronies. The elders were expected to do most of the conciliating in light of reforms introduced by the Empire pertaining to land ownership and surface farming, but most of these went clean against dark elven observances. Tiber Septim, in the name of the one, had ordained a new tradition, and apparently even the gods and goddesses themselves were expected to obey. The new queen threw herself into her work and her studies. She was through with love and men for a long, long time, if not forever. There were other pleasures, she discovered, as Symmachus had promised her long ago. Those were of the mind, and those of power. She developed surprisingly, for she had always rebelled against her tutors at the imperial city, a deep love for dark elven history and mythology, a hunger to know more fully the people from whom she had sprung. She was gratified to learn that they had been proud warriors and skilled craftsmen and cunning mages since time immemorial. Tiber Septim lived for another half-century, during which she saw him on several occasions as she was bidden to the imperial city on one reason of state or another. He greeted her with warmth during these visits, and they even had long talks together about the events in the empire, when opportunity would permit. He seemed to have quite forgotten that there had ever been anything between them more than easy friendship and a profound political allegiance. He changed little as the years passed. Rumor had it that his mages had developed spells to extend his vitality, and that even the one had granted him immortality. Then one day, a messenger came with the news that Tiber Septim was dead, and his grandson, Pelagius, was now emperor in his place. They had heard the news in private, she and Symmachus. The sometime imperial general and now her trusted prime minister took it stoically, as he took most everything. Somehow it doesn't seem possible, Barenziah said. I told you. It is the way of humans. They are short-lived people. It doesn't really matter. His power lives on, and his son now wields it. You called him your friend once. Do you feel nothing? No grief? He shrugged. There was a time when you called him somewhat more. What do you feel, Barenziah? They had long ago ceased to address each other in private by their former titles. Emptiness, loneliness, she said. Then she too shrugged. But that's not new. I know, he said softly, taking her hand. Barenziah. He turned her face up and kissed her. The act filled her with astonishment. She couldn't remember his ever touching her before. She had never thought of him in that way, and yet, undeniably, an old familiar warmth spread through her. She had forgotten how good it felt, that warmth. Not the scorching heat she felt with Tiber Septim, but the comforting robust ardor she somehow associated with straw. Straw! Poor Straw, she hadn't thought of him in so long. He would be middle-aged now, if he were still alive. Probably with a dozen children, she thought affectionately, and a hearty wife, who hopefully could talk for two. Marry me, Barenziah, Symmachus was saying. He seemed to have picked up her thoughts on marriage, children, wives. I worked and toiled and waited long enough, haven't I? Marriage. A peasant with peasant dreams. The thought appeared in her mind, clear and unbidden. Hadn't she used those very same words to describe straw so very long ago? And yet, why not? If not Symmachus, who else? Many of the great noble families of Morrowind had been wiped out in Tiber Septim's Great War of Unification before the treaty. The Arch-Elven rule had been restored, it was true, but not the old, not the true nobility. Most of them were upstarts like Symmachus, and not even half as good or deserving as he was. He had fought to keep Mournhold whole and hale when their so-called councillors would have picked at its bones, sucked them dry as Ebonheart had been sucked dry. He had fought for Mournhold, fought for her, while she and the kingdom grew and thrived. She felt a sudden rush of gratitude, and, undeniably, affection. He was steady and reliable, and he had served her well, and loved her well. Why not? She said, smiling, and took his hand and kissed him. Oh no, I am worried about her now. I hope she's not treated badly or anything, just she deserves to be treated well. Although he does have some underhanded motives to do this. I really do hope she has a good time. Oh no, I really want them to have a good marriage. I mean, as good as it can be, you know? Interesting that when he said that, she remembered straw, kind of making the connection there. Interesting to have her perspective of that. The union was a good one, in its political as well as personal aspects, while Tiber Septim's grandson, the Emperor Pelagius I, viewed her with a jaundiced eye. His trust in his father's old friend was absolute. Symmachus, however, was still viewed with suspicion by Morwen's stiff-necked folk. Chary at his peasant ancestry and his close ties to the empire, but the queen was quite unshakably popular. The Lady Barenziah, one of our own, it was whispered, held captive as we. Barenziah felt content. There was work and there was pleasure, and what more could one ask of life? The years passed swiftly, with cries to be dealt with, and storms and famines and failures to be weathered, and plots to be foiled, and conspirators to be executed. Mournhold prospered steadily. Her people were secure and fed, her mines and farms productive. All was well, save that the royal marriage had produced no children, no heirs. Elven children are slow to come and most demanding of their welcome, and noble children more so than others. Thus many decades had come to pass before they grew concerned. The fault lies with me, Symmachus. I am damaged goods, Barenziah said bitterly. If you want to take another, I want no other, Symmachus said gently. Nor do I know for certain that the fault is yours. Perhaps it is mine. Whichever. We will seek a cure. If there is damage, surely it may be repaired. How so? When we dare not entrust anyone with a true story, healers' oaths do not always hold. It won't matter if we change the time and circumstances a bit. Whatever we say, or fail to say. Jeffrey, the storyteller, never rests. The god's inventive mind and quick tongue are ever busy spreading gossip and rumors. Priests and healers and mages came and went, but all the prayers, potions, and philters produced not even a promise of bloom, yet alone a single fruit. Eventually they thrust it from their minds and left it in the gods' hands. They were yet young, as elves went, with centuries ahead of them. There was time. With elves, there was always time. Barenziah sat at dinner in the great hall, pushing food about on a plate, feeling bored and restless. Symmachus was away, having been summoned to the imperial city by Tiber Septim's great-great-grandson, Uriel Septim. Or was it his great-great-great-grandson? She had lost count, she realized. Their faces seemed to blur into the next. Perhaps she should have gone with him, but there had been the delegation from Tyre on a tiresome matter that nevertheless required delicate handling. A bard was singing in an alcove of the hall, but Barenziah wasn't listening. Lately all the songs seemed the same to her, whether new or old. Then a turn of phrase caught her attention. He was singing of freedom, of adventure, of freeing Morrowind from its chains. How dare he? Barenziah sat up straight, turned to glare at him. Worse, she realized he was singing of some ancient and now immaterial war with the SKYRIM Norths, praising the heroism of Kings Edward and Moralin and their brave companions. The tale was old enough, certainly, yet the song was new, and its meaning, Barenziah couldn't be sure. A bold fellow, this bard, but with a strong, passionate voice and a good ear for music. Rather handsome, too, in a raffish sort of way. He didn't look to be well off exactly, nor was he all that young. Certainly he couldn't be under a century of age. Why hadn't she heard him before, or at least heard of him? Who is he? She inquired of a lady in waiting. The woman shrugged and said, calls himself the Nightingale, my lady. No one seems to know anything about him. Bid him speak with me when he has done. The man called the Nightingale came to her, thanked her for the honor of the queen's audience and the fat purse she handed him. His manner wasn't bold at all, she decided, rather quiet and unassuming. He was quick enough to gossip about others, but she learned nothing about him. He turned all the questions away with a choking repose or a ribald tale. Yet these were recounted so charmingly it was impossible to take offense. My true name, my lady, I am no one. No, my parents named me No one. Or was it nobody? What matters it? It matters not. How many parents give name to what which they know not? Ah, I believe that was the name. Know not. I have been the nightingale for so long I do not remember, since, last month at the very least, or was it last week? All my memory goes into song and tale, you see, my lady. I have none left for myself. I'm really quite dull. Where was I born? Why? Nowhere. I plan to settle in Dunroming when I get there, but I'm in no hurry. I see. And will you then marry a Dalsher? Very perceptive of you, my lady. Perhaps. Although I find in haste quite charming too. At whiles. Ah, you're fickle then. Like the wind, my lady. I blow hither and yon, hot and cold, as chance suits. Chance is my sweet, naught else wears well on me. Barenziah smiled. Stay with us a while, then, if you will, my lord Erhatic. As you wish, my lady. Right. That was a bit difficult to read, so if I made any mistakes, sorry. After that briefest exchange, Barenziah found her interest in life somehow rekindled. All that had seemed stale became fresh and new again. She greeted each day with zest, looking forward to conversation with the nightingale and the gift of his song. Unlike the other bards, he never sang her praises, nor other women's, but only of high adventure and bold deeds. When she asked him about this, he said, "What a greater praise of your beauty could you ask, my lady, than that which your own mirror gives you? And if words you would have, you have those of the greatest, of those greater than my callow self. How should I vie with them, I who was born but a week gone by?" For once they were speaking privately. The queen, unable to sleep, had summoned him to her chamber that his music might soothe her. "You are lazy and a coward, Sarah, else I hold no charm for you." "My lady, to praise you I must know you. I can never know you, but wrapped in enigma, in clouds of enchantment." "Nay, not so. Your words are what weave enchantment, your words, and your eyes, and your body. Know me if you will, know me if you dare." He came to her then. They lay close, they kissed, they embraced. "Not even Barenziah truly knows Barenziah," he whispered softly. "So how may I, my lady? You seek and know it not, nor yet for what. What would you have that you have not?" "Passion," she answered back. "Passion and children born of it." "And for your children what? What birthright might there be theirs?" "Freedom," she said. "The freedom to be what they would be. Tell me, you who seem wisest to these eyes and ears, and the soul that needs them, where may I find these things? One lies beside you, the other beneath you. But would you dare stretch out your hand, that you might take what could be yours and your children's? Symmachus, in my person lies the answer to part of what you seek. The other lies hidden below us in these, your very kingdom's mines, that which will grant us the power to fulfill and achieve our dreams. That which Edward and Moralind between them used to free High Rock and their spirits from the hateful domination of the North. If it be properly used, my lady, none may stand against it, not even the power the Emperor controls. Freedom, you say? Barenziah, freedom it gives from the chains that bind you. Think on it, my lady." He kissed her again, softly, and withdrew. "You're not leaving?" she cried out. Her body yearned for him. "For now," he said. "Pleasures of the flesh are nothing beside what we might have together. I would have you think on what I have just said. I do not need to think. What must we do? What preparations must be made? Why, none. The mines may not be entered freely, it is true, but with the queen at my side, who will stand outward? Once below, I can guide you where this thing lies, and lift it from its resting place. Then the memory of her endless studies slid into place. The horn of summoning, she whispered in awe. Is it true? Could it be? How do you know? I have read that it is buried beneath the measureless caves of Daggerfall. Nay, long have I studied this matter. Ere his death, King Edward gave the horn for safekeeping into the hand of his old friend, King Morling. He in turn secreted it here in Mournhold under the guardianship of the god Ethan, whose birthplace and Beliwick this is. Now you know that it has cost me many long years and weary mile to discover. But the god? What of Ethan? Trust me, my lady heart. All will be well. Laughing softly, he blew her a last kiss and was gone. On the morrow they passed the guards at the great portals that led into the mines and further below. Under pretense of her customary tour of inspection, Barenziah, unattended but for the nightingale, ventured into the cavern after subterranean cavern. Eventually they reached what looked like a forgotten sealed doorway, and upon entering found that it led to an ancient part of the workings, long abandoned. The going was treacherous, for some of the old shafts had collapsed, and they had to clear a passage through the rubble, or find a way around the more impassable piles. Vicious rats and huge spiders scurried here and there, sometimes even attacking them, but they proved no match for Barenziah's firebolt spells or the nightingale's quick dagger. We have been gone too long, Barenziah said at length. They will be looking for us. What will I tell them? Whatever you please, the nightingale laughed. You're the queen, aren't you? The Lord Symmachus, that peasant obeys whoever holds power. Always has, always will. We shall hold the power, my lady love. His lips were sweet as wine. His touch both fire and ice. Now, she said, take me now. I'm ready. Her body seemed to hum, every nerve and muscle taut. Not yet, not here, not like this. He waved around, indicating the aged, dusty debris and grim walls of rock. Just a little while longer. Reluctantly, Barenziah nodded her assent. They resumed walking. Here, he said at last, pausing before the blank barrier. Here it lies. He scratched a rune in the dust, his other hand weaving a spell as he did so. The wall dissolved. It revealed an entrance to some ancient shrine. In the midst stood a statue of a god, hammer in hand, poised above an adamantium anvil. By my blood, Ethan, the nightingale cried, I bid thee waken, Morling's heir of Ebonheart am I, last of the royal line, sharer of thy blood. At Morrowind's last need, with all the elfendom in dread peril of their selves and souls, release to me that guerdon which thou guardest. Now I do bid thee strike. At his final words the statue glowed and quickened. The blank stone eyes shone a bright red. The massive head nodded. The hammer smote the anvil, and it split asunder with a thunderous crash, the stone god itself crumbling. Barenziah clapped her hands over her ears and crouched down, shaking terribly and moaning out loud. The nightingale strode forward boldly and clasped the thing that lay among the ruins with a roar of ecstasy. He lifted it high. Someone's coming, Barenziah cried in alarm, then noticed for the first time what it was he was holding aloft. Wait, that's not the horn, it's a staff. Indeed, my lady, you see truly at last. The nightingale laughed aloud. I am sorry, my lady sweet, but I must leave you now. Perhaps we shall meet again one day. Until then... until then... Symmachus, he said to the mail-clad figure who had appeared behind them. She's all yours. You may claim her back. No, Barenziah screamed. She sprang up and ran towards him, but he was gone, winked out of existence. just as Symmachus, claymore drawn, reached him. His blade cleaved a single stroke through empty air. Then he stood still, as if taking the stone's god place. Barenziah said nothing, heard nothing, saw nothing, felt nothing. Oh no! You got tricked, Barenziah. You should not have trusted a bard. Even more someone that's charming. You haven't had good luck with men. You should know this. To be fair, he was very good talking. I don't blame her. Symmachus told that half-dozen or so elves who had accompanied him that the nightingale and Queen Barenziah had lost their way and had been set upon by giant spiders, that the nightingale had lost his footing and fallen into a deep crevice, which closed over him, that his body could not be recovered, that the queen had been badly shaken by the encounter, and deeply mourned the loss of her friend, who had fallen in her defense. Such was Symmachus' presence and power of command that the slack-jawed knights, none of whom had caught more than a glimpse of what happened, were convinced that it was all exactly as he said. The queen was escorted back to the palace and taken to her chamber, whereupon she dismissed her servants in waiting. She sat still before her mirror for a long time, stunned, too distraught even to weep. Symmachus stood watching over her. Do you have any idea at all what you have just done? He said finally, flatly, coldly. You should have told me, Barenziah whispered. The staff of chaos. I never dreamed it lay here. He said, a mewling escaped her lips and she doubled over in despair. Oh, what I've done. What have I done? What happens now? What's to come of me? Of us? Did you love him? Yes. Oh my Symmachus, the gods have mercy on me, but I did love him. Did. But now I don't know. I'm not sure Symmachus' hard-lined face softened slightly, and his eyes glittered with a new light, and he sighed. Hey, that's something then. You will become a mother yet, if it's within my power. As for the rest... Barenziah, my dearest Barenziah, I expect you have loosed a storm upon the land. It will be a while yet in the brewing, but when it comes, we will weather it together, as we always have. He came over to her then, and stripped her of her clothing, and carried her to the bed. Out of grief and longing, her enfeebled body responded to his brawny one, as it never had before, pouring forth all that the nightingale had wakened to life in her, and in so doing, calming the restless ghosts of all he had destroyed. She was empty, and emptied, and then she was filled, for a child that was planted and grew within her. As her son flourished in the womb, so did her feeling towards patient, faithful, devoted Symmachus, which had been rooted in long friendship and unbroken affection, and which now, at last, ripened into the fullness of true love. 8 years later, they were again blessed, this time with a daughter. I feel so sorry for her, because see, she has so bad luck with men. Because Symmachus, as much as he's treating her as good as he is, he has his own intentions with her that come from wanting revenge. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I actually think it's actually better for her if she doesn't know that. I'm conflicted about it. Directly after the nightingale's death of the staff of chaos, Symmachus had sent ocean secret communiques to Uriel Septim. He had not gone himself as he would normally have, choosing instead to stay with Barenziah during her fertile period to father a son upon her. For this, and for the theft, he suffered Uriel Septim's temporary disfavor and unjust suspicion. Spies were sent in search of the thief, but the nightingale seemed to have vanished whence he had come, wherever that was. Dark elf in part, perhaps, said Barenziah, but part human too, I think, in disguise. Else would I not have become so quickly to fertility. Part dark elf for sure, and of Asian Rathim lineage at that, else he would not have been able to free the staff. Symmachus reasoned. He turned to peer at her fixedly. I don't think he would have lain with you. As an elf he did not dare, for then he would not have been able to part from you. He smiled. Then he turned serious once more. He knew the staff lay there, not the horn, and that he must teleport to safety. The staff is not a weapon that would have seen him clear, unlike the horn. Praise the gods at least that he does not have that. It seems all was as he expected. But how did he know? I placed the staff there myself, with the aid of the Ragdale and of the Rathim clan, who now sits king in Castle Ebonheart as a reward. Tiber Septim claimed the horn, but left the staff for safekeeping. Now the nightingale can use the staff to sow seeds of strife and dissension, wherever he goes, if he wishes. Yet that alone would not gain him power. That lies with the horn and the ability to use it. I'm not so sure it's power the nightingale seeks, Barenziah said. All seek power, Symmachus said, each in our own way. Not I, she answered. I, my lord, have found that for which I sought. This is getting so interesting. Oh, we're finally on the last volume. Yay! Okay, so the Real Barenziah, volume 5. I'm so excited for the ending of this. As Symmachus had predicted, the theft of the Staff of Chaos had few short-term consequences. The current emperor, Uriel Septim, sent some rather stiff messages expressing shock and displeasure at the staff's disappearance, and urging Symmachus to make every effort to locate its whereabouts and communicate developments to the newly appointed imperial battle mage, Shagar Tharn, in whose hands the matter had been placed. Another no-name. Oh, nice. Tharn. Symmachus thundered in disgust and frustration as he paced about the small chamber where Barenziah, now some months pregnant, was sitting serenely embroidering a baby blanket. Shagar Tharn, indeed. I wouldn't give him directions for crossing the street, not if he were a doddering old blind sot. What have you against him, love? I don't trust that mongrel elf. Part dark elf, part high elf, and part the gods only know what. All the worst qualities of all his combined bloods, I'll warrant, he snorted. No one knows much about him. Claims he was born in southern Wallenwood, of a wood elven mother. Seems to have been everywhere since. Barenziah, sunk in the contentment and lassitude of pregnancy, had only been humoring Symmachus thus far. But now she suddenly dropped her needlework and looked at him. Something had piqued her interest. Symmachus, could this Shagar Tharn have been the nightingale? Disguised? Symmachus thought this over before replying. Nay, my love, human blood seems to be the one missing component in Tharn's ancestry. To Symmachus, Barenziah knew. That was a flaw. Her husband despised wood elves as lazy thieves and high elves as effete intellectuals, but he admired humans, especially Bretons, for their combination of pragmatism, intelligence, and energy. The nightingales of Ebonheart, of the Rathim clan, House Hlalu, the House of Mora in particular, I'll be bound. That house has had human blood in it since our time. Ebonheart was jealous that the staff was laid here when Tiber Septim took the horn of summoning from us. Barenziah sighed a little. The rivalry between Ebonheart and Moorhold reached back almost to the dawn of Morrowind's history. Once the two nations had been one, all the lucrative mines held in fief by the Rathames, whose nobility retained the high kingship of Morrowind. Ebonheart had split into two separate city-states, Ebonheart and Mournhold, when Queen Leon's twin sons, grandsons of the legendary King Morelin, were left as joint heirs. At about the same time, the office of High King was vacated in favor of a temporary war leader to be named by a council in times of provincial emergency. Still, Ebonheart remained jealous of her prerogatives as the oldest city-state of Morrowind. First among equals was the phrase its rulers often quoted, and claimed the rightful guardianship of the Staff of Chaos should have been entrusted to its ruling house. Mournhold responded that King Morlin himself had placed the staff in the keeping of the god Ethan, and Mournhold was unarguably the god's birthplace. Why not tell Shagar Tharn of your suspicions then? Let him recover the thing. As long as it's safe, what does it matter who recovers it, or where it lies? Simak stared at her without comprehension. It matters, he said softly after a while. But I suppose not that much, eh? He added. Certainly not enough for you to concern yourself further with it. You just sit there and tend to your... And here he smiled at her wickedly. Embroidery. Barenziah flung the slamper at him. It hit Simak square in the face, needle, thimble, and all. You know what? Deserved. How dare he? In a few more months, Barenziah gave birth to a fine son, whom they named Elseth. Nothing more was heard of the Staff of Chaos, or the Nightingale. If Ebonheart had the staff in its possession, they certainly did not boast of it. The years passed swiftly and happily. Elseth grew tall and strong. He was much like his father, whom he worshipped. When Elseth was 8 years old, Barenziah bore a second child, a daughter, to Simag's lasting delight. Elseth was his pride, but little Morgaya, named for Simag's mother, held his heart. Oh, she's named as his mother. Okay. Part of his revenge, I guess. Sadly, the birth of Morgaya was not the harbinger of better times ahead. Relations with the Empire slowly deteriorated for no apparent reason. Taxes were raised and quotas increased with each passing year. Symmachus felt that the Emperor suspected him of having had a hand in the staff disappearance and sought to prove his loyalty by making every effort to comply with escalating demands. He lengthened working hours and raised tariffs, and even made up some of the difference from both the royal exchequer and their own private holdings. But the levies multiplied, and commoners and nobles alike began to complain. It was an ominous rumble. "I want you to take the children and journey to the Imperial City," Symmachus said at last in desperation, one evening after dinner. "You must make the Emperor listen, else all Mournhold will be up in revolt come spring." He grinned forcibly. "You have a way with men, love. You always did." Barenziah forced a smile of her own. "Even with you, I take it." "Yes, especially with me," he acknowledged amiably. "Both children?" Barenziah looked over towards a corner window, where Elseth was strumming a lute and crooning a duet with his little sister. Elseth was 15 by then, Morgaya 8. They might soften his heart. Besides, it's high time Elseth was presented before the Imperial Court. "Perhaps that's not your true reason." Barenziah took a deep breath and gasped a little. "You don't think you can keep them safe here? If that's the case, then you're not safe here either. Come with us," she urged. He took her hands in his. "Barenziah, my love, heart of my heart. If I leave now, there will be nothing for us to return to. Don't worry about me. I'll be all right." Hey, I can take care of myself, and I can do it better if I'm not worrying about you or the children. Barencia laid her head against his chest. Just remember that we need you. I need you. We can do without the rest of it if we have each other. Empty hands and empty bellies are easier to bear than an empty heart. She started to cry, thinking of the nightingale and that sordid business with the staff. My foolishness has brought us to this pass. He smiled at her tenderly. If so, this not so bad a place to be. His eyes rested indulgently on their children. None of us shall ever go without, or want for anything. Ever. Ever, my love. I promise you. I cost you everything once, Barencia. I and SKYRIM. Without my aid, the empire would never have begun. I helped this rise. His voice hardened. I can bring about this fall. You may tell little SKYRIM that, and that my patience is not infinite. Barencia gasped. Symmachus was not given to empty threats. She had no more imagined that he would ever turn against the empire than that the old house wolf lying by the gate grate would turn on her. How? She demanded breathlessly, but he shook his head. Better that you not know, he said. Just tell him what I told you. Should he prove recalcitrant? And do not fear. Is SKYRIM enough that he will not take it out on the messenger? He smiled grimly. For if he does, if he ever harms the last heir on you, my love, or the children, so help me all the gods of Tamriel, he would pray that he hadn't been born. I'll hunt him down, him and his entire family, and I won't rest until the last SKYRIM is dead. The red dark elven eyes of Symmachus gleamed brightly in the ebbing firelight. I plight you that oath, my love, my queen, my Barencia. Barencia held him as tight as she could, but in spite of the warmth in his embrace, she couldn't help shivering. Barencia stood before the Emperor's throne, trying to explain Morhol's traits. She had waited weeks for an audience with Uriel SKYRIM, having been fobbed off on his pretext or that His Majesty is indisposed, and urgent matters demands His Excellency's attention. I am sorry, Your Highness. There must be some mistake. Your appointment is for next week. No. See... And now it wasn't even going well. The Emperor did not even make the slightest pretense at listening to her. He hadn't invited her to sit, nor had he dismissed the children. Healthset stood still as a carven image, but little Morgaya had begun to fuss. The state of her own mind didn't help her any. Shortly upon arrival at her lodgings, the Mornholdian ambassador to the imperial city had demanded entry, bringing with him a sheaf of dispatches from Symmachus. Bad news, and plenty of it. The revolt has finally begun. The peasants had organized around a few disgruntled members of Mornhol's minor nobility, and were demanding Symmachus step down and hand over the reins of government. Only the Imperial Guard and a handful of troops whose families had been retainers of Barenziah's house for generations stood between Symmachus and the rebel. Hostilities had already broken out, but apparently Symmachus was safe and still in control. Not for long, he wrote. He entreated Barenziah to try her best with the Emperor, but in any case, she was to stay in the Imperial City until he wrote to tell her that it was safe to go back home with the children. She had tried to barge her way through the Imperial bureaucracy with little success, and to add to her growing panic, all news from Morhol had come to a sudden stop. Tottering between rage and the Emperor's numerous majordomus and fear of the fate awaiting her and her family, the weeks had passed by tensely, agonizingly, remorselessly. Then one day, the Morholdian ambassador came calling to tell her She should expect news from Symmachus the following night at the latest, not through the regular channels, but by Nighthawk. Seemingly by the same stroke of luck, she was informed that same day by a clerk from the imperial court that Uriel Septim had finally consented to grant her an audience early in the morrow. The emperor had greeted the three of them when they came into the audience chamber with a too bright smile of welcome that nonetheless didn't reach his eyes. Then, as she presented her children, he had gazed at them with a fixed attention that was real, yet somehow inappropriate. Barenziah had been dealing with humans for nearly 500 years now, and had developed the skill of reading their expressions and movements. That was far beyond what any human could ever perceive. Try as the emperor might conceal it, there was hunger in his eyes, and something else. Regret? Yes, regret. But why? He had several fine children of his own. Why covet hers? And why look at her with such a vicious, however brief, yearning? Perhaps he had tired of his consort. Humans were notoriously, though predictably, inconstant. After that one long, burning glance, his gaze had shifted away as she began to speak of her mission and the violence that had erupted in Mournhold. He sat still as stone throughout the entire account, puzzled at his inertia and vexed no end. Barenziah stared into the pale, set face, looking for some trace of the Septims she had known in the past. She didn't know Uriel Septim well, having met him once when he was still a child, and then again at his coronation 20 years later. Twice, that was all. He had been a stern and dignified presence at the ceremony, even as a young adult, yet not easily remote as this more mature man was. In fact, despite the physical resemblance, he didn't seem to be the same man at all. Not the same, yet something about him was familiar to her. More familiar than it should be, some trick of posture or gesture. Suddenly, she felt very hot, as if lava had been poured over her. Illusion. She had studied the arts of illusion well since the nightingale had deceived her so badly. She had learned to detect it, and she felt it now, as certainly as a blind man could feel the sun on his face. Illusion. But why? Her mind worked furiously, even as her mouth went on reciting details about Mournhold's troubles. Vanity? Humans were often as ashamed as at the signs of aging as elves were proud to exhibit them. Yet the face Uriel Septim wore seemed consistent with his age. Barenziah dared use none of her own magic. Even petty nobles had means of detecting magicka, if not actually shielding themselves from its effects, within their own halls. The use of sorcery here would bring down the emperor's wrath as surely as throwing a dagger would. Magic. Illusion. Suddenly she was brought to mind of the nightingale, and then he was sitting before her. Then the vision changed, and he was Uriel Septim. He looked sad, trapped, and then the vision faded once more, and another man sat in his place, like the nightingale, and yet unlike. Pale skin, bloodshot eyes, elven ears, and about him a fierce glow of concentrated malice, an aura of eldritch energy, a horrible, destructive shimmer. This man was capable of anything, and then once again she was looking into the face of Uriel Septim. How could she be sure she wasn't imagining things? Perhaps her mind was playing tricks on her. She felt a sudden vast weariness, as if she had been carrying a heavy burden too long and too far. She decided to abandon her earnest narrative of Mournhold ills, as it was quite plainly getting her nowhere, and switch back to pleasantry. Pleasantry, however, with a hidden agenda. Do you remember, sire? Symmachus and I had dinner with your family shortly after your father's coronation. You were no older than a tiny Morgaya here. We were greatly honored to be the only guest that evening, except for your best friend, Justin, of course. Ah, yes, the Emperor said, smiling cautiously. Very cautiously. I do believe I recall that. You and Justin were such friends, Your Majesty. I was told he died not long after. A great pity. Indeed, I still do not like to speak of him. His eyes turned blank, or blanker, if it had been possible. As for your request, my lady, we shall take it under advisement and let you know. Barenziah bowed, as did the children. A nod from the Emperor dismissed them, and they backed away from the imperial presence. She took a deep breath when they emerged from the throne room. Justin had been an imaginary playmate, although young Uriel had insisted a place be set for Justin at every meal. Not only that, Justin, despite the boy's name, had been a girl. Symmachus had kept up the joke long after she had gone the way of imaginary childhood friends, inquiring after Justin's health whenever he and Uriel Septim met, and being responded to in as mock serious a fashion. The last Barenziah had heard of Justin several years ago. The Emperor had evidently joked elaborately to Symmachus that he had met an adventurous, though incorrigible Kashid youth, married him, and settled down in Landrel to raise fire ferns and mugworts. The man sitting on the Emperor's divan was not Uriel Septim. The nightingale. Could it be? Yes. A chord of recognition ran through her, and Barenziah knew she was right. It was him. It was the nightingale, masquerading as the Emperor. Symmachus had been wrong. So wrong. What now? She wondered frantically. What had become of Uriel Septim? And more to the point, what did it mean for her and Symmachus, and of old Mournhold? Thinking back, Barenziah guessed that their troubles were due to this false emperor, this nightingale, spawned glamour, or whatever he really was. He must have taken Uriel Septim's place shortly before the unreasonable demands of Mournhold had begun. That would explain why relations had deteriorated so long, as humans reckon time. Long after her disapproved liaison with Tiber Septim. The nightingale knew of Symmachus' famed loyalty to and knowledge of the Septim house, and was effecting a preemptive strike. If that were the case, they were all in terrible danger. She and the children were in his power, here in the imperial city, and Symmachus was left alone to deal with troubles of the nightingale's brew in Mournhold. What must she do? Barenziah impelled the children ahead of her, a hand on each shoulder, trying to stay cool, collected, her ladies-in-waiting and personal knights escort trailing behind. Finally, they reached their waiting carriage. Even though their suite of rooms was only a few blocks from the palace, royal dignity forbade travel on foot for even short distances. And for once, Barenziah was glad of it. The carriage seemed a kind of refuge now, false as she knew the feeling must be. A boy dashed up to one of the guards and handed him a scroll, then pointed towards the carriage. The guard brought it to her. The boy waited, eyes wide and shining. The epistle was brief and complimentary, and simply inquired if King Edwire of Wayrest, of the province of High Rock, might be granted an audience with the famed Queen Barenziah of Mournhold, as he had heard much of her and would be pleased to make her acquaintance. Barenziah's first impulse was to refuse. She wanted only to leave the city. Certainly she had no inclination towards any alliance with a dazzled human. She looked up, frowning, and one of the guards said, "My lady, the boy says his master awaits your reply yonder." She looked in the direction indicated and saw a handsome elderly man on horseback, surrounded by a half-dozen courtiers and cavaliers. He caught her eye and bowed respectfully, taking off a plumed hat. "Very well," Barenziah said to the boy on impulse. Tell your master he may call on me tonight after dinner hour. King Edward looked polite and grave, and rather worried, but not in the least love-struck. At least that was something, she thought pensively. Barenziah stood at the tower window, waiting. She could sense the familiar nearness. But though the night sky was clear as day to her eyes, she could not yet see him. Then suddenly, he was there, a swift-moving dot beneath the wispy night clouds. A few more minutes and the great night hawk finished its descent, wings folding, talons reaching for her thick leather armband. She carried the bird to its perch, but it waited, panting, as her impatient fingers felt for the message secured in a capsule on one leg. The hawk drank mightily from the water till when she had done, then ruffled its feathers and preened, secure in her presence. A tiny part of her consciousness shared its satisfaction at a job well done, mission accomplished, and rest earned. Yet beneath it all was unease. Things were not right, even to its humble avian mind. Her fingers shook as she unfolded thin parchment and pored over the cramped writing. Not Simaku's bold hand. Barenziah sat slowly, fingers smoothing the document while she prepared her mind and body to accept disaster calmly. If disaster it would be. Disaster it was. The Imperial Guard had deserted Simakus and joined the rebels. Simakus was dead. The remaining loyal troops had suffered a decisive defeat. Simakus was dead. The rebel leader had been recognized as King of Mournhold by Imperial envoys. Simakus was dead. Barenziah and the children had been declared traitors to the Empire, and a price set on their heads. Simakus was dead. So the audience with the Emperor earlier that morning had been nothing but a ruse, a charade. The Emperor must have already known. She was just being strung along, told to stay put, take things easy. My Lady Queen, enjoy the Imperial City and the delights it has to offer. Do make your stay as long as you want. Her stay? Her detention, her captivity, and in all probability, her impending arrest. She had no delusions about her situation. She knew the Emperor and his minions would never let her leave the Imperial City ever again. At least, not alive. Simakus was dead. My lady? Barenziah jumped, startled by the servant's approach. What is it? The Breton is here, my lady. King Edward. The woman added, helpfully, noting Barenziah's incomprehension. She hesitated. Is there news, my lady? She said, nodding towards the night hawk. Nothing that will not wait, Barenziah said quickly, and her voice seemed to echo in the emptiness that suddenly yawned like a gaping abyss inside her. See to the bird. She stood up, smoothed her gown, and prepared to attend to her royal visitor. She felt numb as the stone walls around her, numb as the quiescence of the night air, numb as a lifeless corpse. Simakus was dead? King Edward greeted her gravely and courteously, if a bit fulsomely. He claimed to be a fervent admirer of Simakus, who figured prominently in his family's legends. Gradually, he turned the conversation to her business with the Emperor. He inquired after details and asked if the outcome had been favorable to Mournhold. Finding her non-committal, he suddenly blurted out, My lady, Queen, you must believe me. The man who claims himself the Emperor is an impostor. I know it sounds mad, but No, Barenziah said, with sudden decisiveness. You're entirely correct, my Lord King. I know. Edward relaxed into his seat for the first time, eyes suddenly shrewd. You know? You're not just humoring someone you might think of a madman. I assure you, my lord, I am not. She took a deep breath. And who do you surmise is this dissembling as the Emperor? The Imperial battle mage, Shagar Tharn. Ah, my Lord King, Have you perchance heard of someone called the Nightingale? Yes, my lady. As a matter of fact, I have. My allies and I believe him to be the one and the same man as the renegade Tharn. I knew it. Barenziah stood up and tried to mask her upheaval. The Nightingale. Shagar Tharn. Oh, but the man was a demon, diabolical and insidious, and so very clever. He had contrived their downfall seamlessly, perfectly. Symmachus, my Symmachus. Edward coughed diffidently. My lady, we need your aid. Barenziah smiled grimly at the irony. I do believe I should be the one saying those words, but go on, please. Of what assistance might I be, my lord king? Quickly the monarch outlined the plot. The mage Rhea, Silmain, of late apprentice to the vile Shagar Tharn, had been killed and declared a traitor by the false emperor. Yet she had retained a bit of her powers and could still contact a few of those she had known well on the mortal plane. She had chosen a champion who would undertake to find the Staff of Chaos, which had been hidden by the traitorous sorcerer in an unknown site. This champion was to wield the staff power to destroy Shagar Tharn, who was otherwise invulnerable, and rescue the true emperor being held prisoner in another dimension. However, the champion, while thankfully still alive, now languished in the imperial dungeons. Tharn's attention must be diverted while the chosen one gained freedom with Rhea's spirit help. Barenziah had the false emperor's ears and seemingly his eyes. Would she provide the necessary distraction? I suppose I could obtain another audience with him, Barenziah said carefully. But would that be sufficient? I must tell you that my children and I have just recently been declared traitors to the Empire. In Morhold, perhaps, my lady, and Morrowind, things are different in the Imperial City and the Imperial Province. The same administrative morass that makes it near impossible to obtain an audience with the Emperor and his ministers also quite assures that you will never be unlawfully imprisoned or otherwise punished without benefit of due legal process. In your case, my lady, and your children's, the situation is further exacerbated by your royal rank. As queen and heirs apparent, your persons are considered inviolable, sacrosanct, in fact. The king grinned. The imperial bureaucracy, my lady, is a double-edged claymore. So at last she and the children were safe from the time being. Then a thought struck her. My lord king, what did you mean earlier when you said I had a false emperor's eyes? And seemingly at that, Edward looked uncomfortable. It was whispered among the servants that Shagar Tharn kept your likeness in a sort of shrine in his chambers. I see. Her thoughts wandered momentarily to that insane romance of hers with the Nightingale. She had been madly in love with him, foolish woman, and the man she had once loved had caused to be killed the man she truly did love. Loved. He's gone now. She still couldn't bring herself to accept the fact that Symmachus was dead. But even if he is, she told herself firmly, my love is alive and remains. He would always be with her, as with the pain of living the rest of her life without him, the pain of trying to survive each day, each night, without his presence, his comfort, his love, the pain of knowing he would never see his children grow into a fine pair of adults who would never know their father, how brave he was, how strong, how wonderful, how loving, especially little Morgaya. And for all you have done to my family, Nightingale, you must die. Does that surprise you? Edwire's words broke into her thoughts. What does surprise me? Your likeness. In Tharn's room. Oh, her features said imperturbably. Yes and no. Edwire could see from her expression that she wished to change the subject. He turned once again to their plans. Our chosen one may need a few days to escape, my lady. Can you give him a bit more time? You trust me in this, my lord king. Why? We are desperate, my lady. We have no choice. But even if we did, why, yes, I would trust you. I do trust you. Your husband has been good to my family over the years. Lord Symmachus is dead. What? Barenziah related the recent events quickly and coolly. My lady queen, but how dreadful. I'm so sorry. For the first time, Barenziah's glacial voice was shaken. In the face of sympathy, she felt her outward calm start to crumble. She gathered her composure and willed herself to stillness. Under the circumstances, my lady, we can hardly ask. Nay, good my lord, under the circumstances, I must do what I may to avenge myself upon the murder of my children's father. A single tear escaped the fortress of her eyes. She brushed it away impatiently. In return, I ask only that you protect my orphaned children as you may. I'm not going to cry. I won't. No. No. Edward drew himself up. His eyes shone. Willingly do I so pledge, most brave and noble queen, the gods of our beloved land, indeed Real itself, be my witness. His words touched her absurdly, yet profoundly. I thank you for my heart and soul, good my lord King Edward. You have mine and my children's everlasting grat. She broke down. No, stop. Don't make me cry. I'm breaking down with her. This is not great. No. I'm crying. No. I was holding out so well. I was trying not to get my voice cracking and everything. I'm just a mess. I know that this was going to happen. Why am I still affected? Why? Can't do it. Let's get to the revenge part. Let's go. She did not sleep that night, but sat in a chair beside her bed, hands folded in her lap, thinking deep and long into the waxing and waning of the darkness. She would not tell the children, not yet, not until she must. She had no need to seek another audience with the Emperor. A summons arrived at first light. She told the children she expected to be gone a few days, bade them give the Selbrants no trouble, and kissed them goodbye. Morgaya whimpered a bit. She was bored and lonely in the Imperial City. Helseth looked dour but said nothing. He was very like his father. At the Imperial Palace, Barenziah was escorted not into the great audience hall, but to a small parlor, where the Emperor sat at a solitary breakfast. He nodded a greeting and waved his hand towards the window. Magnificent view, isn't it? Barenziah stared out over the towers of the great city. It dawned on her that this was the very chamber where she had first met Tiber Septim all those years ago. Centuries ago. Tiber Septim, another man she had loved. Who else had she loved? Symmachus, Tiber Septim, and Straw. She remembered the big blonde stable boy with sudden and intense affection. She never realized it till now, but she had loved Straw. Only she had never let him know. She had been so young then. Those had been carefree days. Halcyon days. Before everything. Before all this. Before him. Not Symmachus. The nightingale. She was shocked in spite of herself. The man could still affect her, even now. Even after all that had happened. A strong wave of inchoate emotion swept over her. When she turned back at last, Uriel Septim had vanished, and the nightingale sat in his place. "You knew," he said quietly, scanning her face. "You knew, instantly. I wanted to surprise you. You might at least have pretended." Barencia spread her arms, trying to pacify the maelstrom churning deep inside her. "I'm afraid my skill at pretense is not much for yours, my liege." He sighed. "You're angry." "Just a little, I must admit," she said icily. "I don't know about you, but I find betrayal trifle offensive." "How human of you." She took a deep breath. "What do you want of me?" "Now, you're pretending." He stood up to face her directly. "You know what I want of you. You want to torment me. Go ahead. I'm in your power. But leave my children alone." "No, no, no." "I don't want that at all, Barencia." He came near, speaking low in the old caressing voice that had sent shivers cascading through her body. The same voice that was doing the same thing to her, here and now. "Don't you see? This was the only way." His hands closed on her arms. She felt her resolve fading, her disgust at him weakening. "You could have taken me with you." Unbidden tears gathered in her eyes. He shook his head. "I didn't have the power. But now, I have it all. Mine to have, mine to share, mine to give to you." He once more waved his hand towards the window and the city beyond. "All Tamriel is mine to lay at your feet, and that is only the beginning." "It's too late, too late. You left me to him." "He's dead. The peasant's dead. A scant few years, what do they matter? The children can be adopted by me, and we will have others together, Barencia. Oh, and what children they will be! What things we shall pass on to them! Your beauty, my magic. I have powers you haven't even dreamt of, not in your most untamed imaginings." He moved to kiss her. She slipped his grasp and turned away. "I don't believe you." "You do. You know. You're still angry, that's all." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me what you want, Barencia." "Barencia, my beloved. Tell me. It shall be yours." Her whole life flashed in front of her. The past, the present, and the future still to come. Different times, different lives, different Barencias. Which one was the real one? Which one was the real Barencia? For by that choice she would determine the shape of her fate. She made it. She knew. She knew who the real Barencia was and what she wanted. "A walk in the garden, my liege," she said. "A song or two, perhaps." The nightingale laughed. "You want to be courted? And why not? You do it so well. It's been long. Besides, since I have had the pleasure." He smiled. "As you wish, my lady Queen Barencia. Your wish is my command." He took her hand and kissed it, now and forever. I'm so mad at him. I'm so angry. I am so angry. I'm not doing great. First I was trying not to break down and cry in the middle of reading. And now I'm trying not to let anger take control and make me swear in the middle of reading. This man is disgusting. Okay. And so they spent the days in courtship, walking, talking, singing and laughing together, while the empire's business was left to subordinates. "I would like to see the staff," Barencia said idly one day. "I only had a glimpse of it, you will recall." He frowned. "Nothing would give me greater pleasure Heart's delight, but that would be impossible. You don't trust me, Barenziah pouted, but softened her lips when he leaned over for a kiss. Nonsense, love. Of course I do, but it isn't here, he chuckled. In fact, it isn't anywhere. He kissed her again, more passionately this time. You're talking in riddles again. I want to see it. You couldn't have destroyed it. Ah, you gained in wisdom since we last met. You inspired my hunger for knowledge somewhat. She stood up. The staff of chaos can't be destroyed, and it can't be removed from Tamriel, not without the direst consequences to the land itself. Ah, you impressed me, my love. All true. It is not destroyed, and is not removed from Tamriel. And yet, as I said, it isn't anywhere. Can you solve the puzzle? He pulled her to him, and she leaned into his embrace. Here's a greater riddle still, he whispered. How does one make one of two? That I can, and will show you. Their bodies merged, lips tangled together. Later, when they had drawn a bit apart, and he lay dozing, she thought sleepily. 1 of 2, 2 of 1, 3 of 2, 2 of 3. What cannot be destroyed or vanished might be split apart. Perhaps. She stood up, eyes blazing. She started to smile. The Nightingale kept a journal. He scribbled entries into it every night, after quick reports of underlings. It was locked in a bureau, but the lock was a simple one. She had, after all, been a member of the Thieves' Guild in a past life, in another life, another Barenziah. One morning, Barenziah managed to sneak a quick look at it while he was occupied at his toilet. She discovered that the first piece of the Staff of Chaos was hidden in an ancient dwarvish mine called Fang Lair. Although its location was given only to the vaguest of terms, the diary was crammed with jotted events in an odd shorthand and was very hard to decipher. All Tamriel, she thought, in his hands and mine, and more perhaps. And yet, for all his exterior charm, there was a cold emptiness where his heart should have been, a vacuum of which he was quite unaware, she thought. One could glimpse it now and then, when his eyes would go blank and hard, and yet, though he had a different concept of it, he yearned for happiness too, and contentment. Pleasant dreams, Barenziah thought. And Strop flashed before her eyes again, looking lost and sad. And then Theris, with a feline cashid smile. Tiber Septim, powerful and lonely. Symmachus, stolid Symmachus, who did what ought to be done, quietly and efficiently. The Nightingale, a riddle and a certainty, both the darkness and the light. The Nightingale who would rule all and more, and spread chaos in the name of order. Barenziah got reluctant leave from him to visit her children, who had yet to be told of their father's death and of the Emperor's offer of protection. She finally did, and it wasn't easy. Morgaya clung to her for what seemed like an era, sobbing wretchedly while Helseth ran off into the garden to be alone, afterwards refusing all her attempts to speak to him on the subject of his father, or even to let her hold him to her breast. Edwire called on her while she was there. She told him that she had discovered so far, explaining that she must remain a while yet and learn more as she could. The Nightingale teased her about her elderly admirer. He was quite aware of Edwire's suspicion, but he wasn't the last bit perturbed, for no one took the old fool seriously. Barenziah even managed to arrange a reconciliation of sorts between them. Edwire hopelessly recounted his misgivings, and his old friend, the Emperor, forgave him. He was afterward invited to dine with them at least once a week. The children liked Edwire, even Helseth, who disapproved of his mother's liaison with the Emperor and consequently detested him. He had become surly. and temperamental as the days passed, and frequently quarreled with both his mother and her lover. Edwire was not happy with the affair either, and the Nightingale took great delight at times in openly displaying his affection for Barenziah just to nettle the old man. They could not marry, of course, for Uriel Septim was already married. At least not yet. The Nightingale had exiled the Empress shortly after taking the Emperor's place, but had not dared harm her. She was given sanctuary by the Temple of the One. It had been given out that she was suffering from ill health, and rumors had been circulated by the Nightingale's agent that she had mental problems. The Emperor's children had likewise been dispatched to various prisons all across Tamriel, disguised as schools. She will grow worse in time, Nightingale said carelessly, referring to the Empress and eyeing Barenziah's swollen breasts and swelling belly with satisfaction. As for their children, well, life is full of hazards, isn't it? We'll be married, your child will be my true heir. He did want a child. Barenziah was sure of that. She was far less sure, however, of his feelings for her. They argued continually now, often violently, usually about Helseth, whom he wanted to send away to school in Somerset Isle, the province farthest from the imperial city. Barenziah made no effort to avoid these altercations. The Nightingale, after all, had no interest in a smooth, unruffled life, and besides, he thoroughly enjoyed making up afterwards. Occasionally, Barenziah would take the children and retreat to their old apartment, declaring she wanted no more to do with him, but he would always come to fetch her back, and she would always let herself be fetched back. It was ineffable, like the rising and settling of Tamriel's twin moons. She was 6 months pregnant before she finally deciphered the location of the last staff piece. An easy one, since every dark elf knew where the Mount of Dagot Ur was. When she next quarreled with the Nightingale, she simply left the city with Edwire and rode hard for High Rock and Wayrest. The Nightingale was furious, but there was little he could do. His assassins were rather inept, and he dared not leave his seat of power to pursue them in person, nor could he openly declare war on Wayrest. He had no legitimate claim on her or her unborn child. True to form, the imperial city's nobility had disapproved of his liaison with Barenziah, and they had so many years ago of diverse septims, and were glad to see her go. Wayrest was equally distrustful of her, but Edwire was frantically loved by his prosperous little city-state, and allowances were readily made for his eccentricities. Barenziah and Edwire were married a year after the birth of her son by the Nightingale. In spite of this unfortunate fact, Edwire doted on her and her children. She in her turn did not love him, but she was fond of him, and that was something. It was nice to have someone, and Wayrest was a very good place, a good place for children to grow up, while they waited and bided their time and prayed for the champion's success in his mission. Barenziah could only hope that he wouldn't take very long, whoever this unnamed champion was. She was a dark elf, and she had all the time in the world, all the time, but no more love left to give, and no more hatred left to burn. She had nothing left, nothing but pain and memories, and her children. She only wanted to raise her family and provide them a good life, and be left to live out what remained of hers. She had no doubt it was going to be a long life yet, and during it she wanted peace and quiet, and serenity of her soul as well as of her heart. Pleasant dreams. That was what she wanted. That was what the real Barenziah wanted. That was what the real Barenziah was. Pleasant dreams. Pleasant dreams. Oh no. Oh, what a good way to finish it. Oh god. Oh, Karaman. Why? Why couldn't she be happy at the end? Like, happy. Not happy that she's okay with everything. Oh, I mean, she went through a lot, so getting to that point is already a big thing. Oh god. That was a lot. Oh god, that was a great read. I love that book. That's really good. It would be nice to find something else like that. I enjoyed it a lot. It read like a novel. Really good. Oh god. Also, she never actually knew that Symmachus actually married her for his own type of revenge. She never knew that, which is actually kind of good. Oh god. Then stayed with a nightingale that basically caused the death of Symmachus, having to stay with him, fighting, just so her children could be safe, and just to find all the pieces of the Staff of Chaos. That is so good. That is really good. Oh god, that left me just broken. What? Oh god. I just looked at the time I've been recording in OBS. It's 55 minutes. Almost 56 minutes, actually. Almost an hour. That book was long. Well, I was fucking up my reading a lot, so maybe that's why, but an hour. Oh, thank God I tried to. I did like two by two, like one first and then 2 and 3 and then 4 and 5. I would not have been able to read this in one take. That would be a lot. This is going to be a very long, I mean, not very long actually. It's like 40 minutes, 40 something minutes, the first one, and this one is almost an hour. Well, yeah, it's going to be quite a lot. Oh, but it was super good. I really enjoyed that. If I don't know how many people are going to be here in this part, but if there's anything like this one here in Skyrim, can you tell me the name, the title, so I can look for it and then kind of space them out, so I don't get an emotional wreck every a few weeks. Thank you. Okay, so that would be all for today. Hope everyone enjoyed that. I'm going to recover from the emotional distress that this just put me through. So bye bye. Goodbye.